Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our SF Hour with Raj. I'm your host for tonight, Ryan. Let's give Raj a warm welcome to the uSTADIUM family. How's it going, Raj?
What's up? What's up, my man? I'm doing good. I'm just excited. We got free agency coming next week, and we've had a little bit of news here and there, and over the last couple of days, and I expect next week to go just absolutely insane. It's been a crazy off season, so I'm ready to roll.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, coming off of a down year for the 49ers, this is a big time for Shanahan and the front office out in Santa Clara to build up hope and, sign good players and say, hey, we can make it back to the Super Bowl in 2021. And I think you saw with Detroit and Dan Campbell, it can be an infusion of like enthusiasm, optimism, and I think San Francisco can take full advantage of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was a very frustrating season. 1 year away from going to the Super Bowl and coming so close. Hate to think about that game sometimes because we just 10 minutes to go, we let it slip away, man. And I could sit here and talk about that all day, but I'm not because of my PTSD starting to get triggered. So again, crazy season, a lot of injuries, and now we have a lot of free agents. Before the start of free agency started, cap space was kind of a worrying matter. But over the last couple of weeks, they did a couple things, restructured some deals, cut some loose ends, and they're making some money available so they can get some of the guys they need back. That's going to be the key for this team, getting a lot of the players that are really important back. And not only that, just getting players back healthy, like Nick Bosa and, some of the other guys out there, especially Bosa. He's like the big guy that needs to be, healthy and everything. So a lot of questions. But, yeah, I think if they get everything done right this offseason, draft well, get their key players, and everybody comes back healthy, it's a Super Bowl contending team, That's the caliber, and that's their MO. And, again, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they're always positive, and you got to, as a Niner fan, a lot of people always say, trust the process, or brick by brick. Just got to listen and trust your front office.
Absolutely. So recently, the 49ers re-signed Emmanuel Moseley and Weston Richburg. What moves can we see the 49ers make before the league year opens on Wednesday afternoon?
So good question, and to kind of touch base on those moves, last week also they re-signed Ross Dwelley, tight end, and safety Marcel Harris. So over the last couple of weeks, and then 2 weeks before that, Jeff Wilson. So you saw a lot of the minor signings, getting some of the depth out of the way. So I think this next couple of days is when they're going to really attack and get some of their key players, like we had mentioned, which is one of the most critical parts. I think Trent Williams is a guy that's really going to be the guy they go after first. I think Trent is their number one priority. They made it clear. He's arguably the best left tackle in the game. Big market for him. He's a all-pro tackle, 8-year Pro Bowler, and he came right in. He filled up. He had big shoes to step in for with Joe Staley, but he did well, and I think he's only going to get better, because he came in last season after missing a whole year of football, a little bit rusty to begin. He didn't play his best football until towards the end. So I think that's a guy that I think is going to get a big contract, no matter where he goes, but especially in the Niners. He's going to test the market. He wants to see what he can get. But today, NFL Network, as you see the graphic, Mike Garoppolo reported that they're going to try to make a run at him, a strong push before that market opens, on Wednesday. So I think that's the guy that they're right now on the phone. When the legal tampering period comes on Monday open, I honestly think that they're going to hit it hard and say, hey, look, man, this is the offer. We got to make a move. I think they're offering them big money, and I think it's going to be around 4 years with $23 million per year up to. So I think that's the guy. That's the guy that they're going to really go all in. And then, of course, there's other players, but I think Trent Williams is the number one priority. I've been saying it all offseason, but with all the reports lately, I think that's the guy that before Wednesday, they might get this deal done.
Absolutely. Trent had a phenomenal season with San Francisco. I had him as my all-pro tackle, although shout out to David Bakhtiari, was right behind. Williams was terrific in Washington for several years, and then comes over to San Francisco. And at least from an outsider's perspective, it felt like he didn't miss a beat. He was back to pancaking people, back to being an elite left tackle, and I think it was just phenomenal, like diamond in the dirt, I guess, by John Lynch to trade. What was it, a 5th round pick for him?
The 3rd and a 5th round pick, which for an all-pro left tackle is relatively nothing, and especially when you lose a guy like Joe Staley last season. He retired, And it was like, oh man, how are we going to replace this? But this guy pretty much, like you said, he filled the void. That was kind of like stealing candy from a baby. But now he was smart in the fact that he put a no franchise tag clause in his contract because he definitely wants to get paid. This could be his last contract. You can't hate the guy for wanting to cash in and at least seeing his value. I think he's going to see what contract offers he gets. On Monday when the legal tampering period opens, his agent's going to say, hey, look, this is what's on the table. Let's make an assumption the Colts throw some money. And then he's going to listen to see what the Niners offer was. I think if the money's relatively close, within $1 million, he'll stay with the Niners. But if some team comes over the top and gives him, I don't know, for example, 25, 26, 27, where the Niners are going to give him 23, I mean, he's going to take that deal. So I think that's where his MO is. But I think there's a very high priority or probability that he's going to be back with the Niners.
Yeah, I think certainly San Francisco is probably top on his list right now. Indianapolis, with the retirement of Anthony Costanzo, that could be a spot, and Indianapolis has a lot of cap to play with. But I think San Francisco is probably the best home for Williams, and if you can build a strong offensive line, dominant ground game, and get back to the Super Bowl,
Yeah, I agree. Especially with the way they run the ball, the Niners are predicated on the run game. And if Jimmy's going to be the guy that they keep saying, you got to protect him at all costs. You can't throw him out there to the wolves with a Swiss cheese O-line. So,
absolutely. So the 49ers have a good roster. They went to the Super Bowl in 2019, and even though they were ravaged with injuries, they still have tons of talented players. But who do you think San Francisco is going to go after this offseason as a free agent and just bring into the fold, add more talent?
See, and that's a good question because I really don't expect them to go after a lot of talent because I think most of the talent they have is on their roster, and I think that's what they're going to try to prioritize. They always try to prioritize their own players, create that chemistry, create that cohesion. And I think after, they pay like Trent Williams and Kyle Juszczyk's a very important piece to this offense. I think they're going to try to make a run for him. Hopefully Jason Verrett. I think after those chips settle, they'll wait and see what veterans are available because this year with COVID and everything, there's going to be a lot of veterans that don't get paid as much as they probably could or should. Maybe 1-year contracts. I think a guy like Alex Mack can be a guy that they go after, relatively cheaper center because they need a guy, especially with Weston Richburg's news that we'll touch upon later, developing. I think that Alex Mack's a guy that they may be able to go after. There's some safeties out there, but I don't think they're going to touch the safety market, especially getting Marcel Harris back in the mix. They have Tarvarius Moore on his final year of his rookie deal, so he's going to want to prove himself. They have Jimmy Ward. Cornerback is a big position. If they are not able to get Jason Verrett, there's a lot of cornerbacks out there, and I think they're going to look and see what cornerbacks they can look into. So there's a lot. Honestly, I can't put my pulse on which cornerback really they can acquire because another guy that's leaving is Richard Sherman. So I know they're going to be in the cornerback market, but I think their top goal is to get Jason Verrett back. But I don't think they're going to figure out what cornerback they're really going to get until they can figure out if they're getting Jason Verrett back. If he's gone, then they got to start looking at this market and saying, okay, who are we able to get? And even K'Wan Williams, who's on the team, they got to look and see if they can get him back. If they're able to get those two guys, they really don't necessarily need anybody else. I think in that department, I think they'll add some depth maybe on D-line because John Lynch is a big D-line guy. I know they're going to hit the draft hard on the D-line. And, Nick Bosa coming off a big injury, ACL, you don't want to throw him to the wolves, and put all this pressure on him. And especially with D Ford's injury history, I don't even think he's coming back this season. My probability of him coming back this season with the team is pretty low. So maybe some depth. Carlos Dunlap is a guy that could come in relatively cheap. I think they maybe kick the tires on a guy like that. And then, again, Kerry Hyder. He was on the Niners last season, very underrated player. Stepped up, led the team in sacks. Nobody saw this guy coming. He was a undrafted player. He bounced around the league. He played good, so he's going to earn some money. I think they'll try to keep him. But if another team, again, offers him a big contract, they're going to say, hey, look, 1 year with us, that's cool. Go enjoy your money. And, again, I think it's really going to be a guy like maybe Carlos Dunlap where they sign him for a cheaper deal, something like that. But other than that, I really don't see them making a big move, signing some other players. But, hey, anything can happen. Next week's going to be crazy. You never know. I didn't think they would ever trade DeForest Buckner last season, and they did. So we'll see.
And, of course, with DeForest Buckner, you get the number 13 pick, number 14 pick, which eventually turned into Javon Kinlaw after a trade with Tampa. So I think that worked out. Kinlaw had some flashes this year, although Buckner was unbelievable with the Colts.
Yeah, he's Buckner. It's hard to replace an all-pro caliber player. But hey, I think Kinlaw eventually, as he gets going, he didn't have rookie minicamp, no preseason. He's thrown into the fire. As the season got going, he got better. They're gonna have Nick Bosa back next season. He won't have a lot of pressure on him, as much pressure, open things up. So I definitely think Kinlaw will be good. I think that ultimately that trade will have worked out, but I know a lot of Niner fans they're still upset. They hold it over John Lynch's head, but you can't really dictate that for a couple more years. If Javon Kinlaw turns out to be an absolute scrap heap, then we're gonna be like, we should never trade a Buckner. But again, that's something we can talk about all day. We have before. Business side of the game, it's ugly.
Absolutely. So speaking of the business side of the game, recently San Francisco restructured Weston Richburg's contract. He may be angling towards retirement. You touched on Alec Mack. So do you think Richburg is going to retire, or do you think he may come back for one last ride with San Francisco? And if he stays, then he's probably the starter at center. But if he leaves, then someone like Alex Mack comes in, right?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we were talking about yesterday, live on the show when I was on my Instagram page. Is I kind of was thinking over the last couple of weeks we've touched on Richburg. The big consensus was they were going to cut him or release him, reach an injury settlement or whatnot. But after today's news is they restructured the deal. They got about $6 million more in cap space. They're right now, if you don't factor in Emmanuel Mosley's contract from yesterday, they're at about $30 million in cap space, which is pretty good. That's top half of the league cap space wise. So really, ultimately, I don't think he's going to play again. He's had a lot of injuries. He was a good, talented player. They brought him in, big free agent signing. Shanahan has this zone blocking scheme, and he was the perfect center. When he played, he was great. But again, in the center position, you need a lot of stability. And for him always getting hurt, they've had to throw people around. There were 6 different people that played center last season, and that's a lot of the reasons why that center, that O-line was kind of crumbling last year. You could, as good as Trent Williams was, he's not playing center, so it's hard for him to, shift over and pull over to that side when everything's collapsing. So ultimately, knee injury, shoulder injury, you guys had a hip surgery recently. I think he's going to, lick his wounds and call it a career, unfortunately for him. I think ultimately what will happen, now that they restructured it, I think it's easier for them to just, hey, let's reach an injury settlement and you can be on your way. We'll be on our way. I think that's probably the next step. And then again, as far as free agency goes, they have to fill the void at center. They re-signed Dan Brunskill to a 1-year tender, but he's not fit to play center. A lot of people were saying, oh, maybe you can just put Brunskill there. He's better off at guard. So I think what they really have to do, and we said it earlier, Alex Mack, get a good veteran, and he's cheap, so he's not going to cost a lot. And you can still draft a guy, because this year's offensive line class is really loaded with good talent at the center position. So ultimately, you get a guy like Mack, you can draft a center. He can mentor that guy. After a 2-year deal with Mack, or maybe a 1-year deal, that next guy's ready to roll and take the reins. So I think that's the best way of handling that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have the 43rd pick in the draft, right?
Yeah.
So you can use that pick to target someone like Landon Dickerson out of Alabama or Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma. There are quite a few centers that are like end of round 1, middle of round 2 caliber guys that you don't want to pick at 12. I mean, you could trade down, but maybe at 12 you look at a corner, maybe a J.C. Horn or a Surtain or a Farley. If Sherman and Verrett leave, or of course you could look for more offensive weapons, whether that's a Waddle or Devontae Smith, or heaven forbid, Kyle Pitts and George Kittle in the same offense.
Man, I know Pro Football Focus kind of toyed with that notion a couple weeks ago, man. And even though he's not in need, you sometimes have these pipe dreams and you dream about having 2 guys Kyle Pitts and George Kittle together on the same offense. Just would be unfair. It would be unfair. But I agree with what you're saying. You get the best player available at the position you need, cornerback, D lineman, or whatnot. They can trade back. They have 10 draft picks, and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, specifically John Lynch and Adam Peters, those guys are notorious for trading around in the draft, and I could see them moving, trading back, getting an extra draft pick so they can get 2 players in the first round. Like you said, Creed Humphrey, that's probably my favorite center prospect in this draft. If they can get a guy like Humphrey, it'd be unbelievable. Or they can wait a little bit, tail end of the second or early third. A guy like Quinn Miners, who's kind of going up draft stock. This guy, unbelievable. D3 prospect, now everybody has seen him. You know, he had the big gut hanging out at the Senior Bowl, and he's turning heads. This is a guy that we can get. Austin Jackson from Kentucky, guy's pretty underrated. You know, there's some good centers there that we can target. So again, you get Alex Mack, get a guy like one of those guys I mentioned, train him up. We're good in O-line. And again, depth is key because you can never have too many good O-linemen, especially last season. We saw all the injuries ravaged us. If you get depth, man, that's key.
Yeah, and I think San Francisco is in a really good spot in the draft that they're in this sort of limbo that a star caliber player like Pitts, like Chase / Devontae / Waddle could fall there. And that could be hey, Washington, why don't you trade up and go get a weapon for Tyler Heineke? Or New England, trade up and go get a weapon for Cam, right?
Yeah.
And it's also no spot that, well, say all of them go. You know, Pitts goes in the top 7, Waddle goes in the top 7, etc. Trey Lance might be on the board at 12, and San Francisco, if they want to keep Garoppolo, that's a prime trade target if you're New England or if you're Washington or Chicago or any other team that might want to trade up for a quarterback. You can say, hey, San Francisco, I want to trade up to 12 and get Lance, Jones, heaven forbid, Kyle Trask, but probably Lance or Jones.
If someone takes Kyle Trask at 12, the whole NFL Twitter is going to go crazy. NFL is going to go crazy. The internet's going to get broken. But you're right. Your point is great. Is the fact that we're in a good position where we're not desperate for certain positions. You know, we're not like starving. We definitely need some holes to fill. But some team calls and they really want a player that's there at 12. We can get a lot back for that one player. So we're in a very good position. I agree with that.
Yeah, in San Francisco, of course, you have a roster that went to the Super Bowl and had a roster that, you know, I thought could repeat as NFC champions. And your holes, you're one of the few teams in the NFL that like your holes are, oh, well, our third string corner isn't elite. Okay. You know, or it's like San Francisco is one of the most well-rounded rosters as far as I can see in the NFL. And that's a testament to John Lynch, a testament to the cohesiveness of the offense you run and the defense you run. And it's a great spot to be in the draft when you can just say, hey, we're really drafting a lot of depth pieces. Like there's a guy here or there that we want, may need to be a day one starter if everyone leaves in free agency. But hey, if J.C. Horn's there at 12 and he's your number 2 or number 3 cornerback in year 1, that's not the end of the world. Or if
not bad.
Creed Humphrey is your what Dallas is doing with Tyler Biadasz, you know, if he's your, say, right guard year 1 and then becomes your center year 2, let's say you get a year out of Alex Mack, for example, or Richburg comes back for a year, then you slide Humphrey or slide Dickerson or slide any other guy from left / right guard into their more natural center position. San Francisco is looking at not just one good year or 2 good years. They're looking at lots and lots of, like, a decade of being really good. And in a division as competitive as the NFC West, you know, you just need to be consistent. You know, that's how Seattle's been for the last 10 years. That's what the Rams are developing now. That's what the Cardinals seem to lack sometimes.
Yeah, I know. And like you said, the biggest thing is just consistency. But for the Niners, it's just staying healthy. We can get all this talent, reload up on spots that we're going to, you know, lose out on some players. But ultimately, our core players are very talented. You know, you got George Kittle, you got Fred Warner, you know, and you got hopefully Trent Williams is there. You know, you got some really good players. Dre Greenlaw is a good young linebacker. Again, we just have there's some good talented players. Brandon Ayuk, you know, kid hasn't even scratched the surface. Debo Samuel, you got good running back, you know, tandem out there. Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, you know, so they got the talent. Just have to get healthy and hopefully bring in some players that eventually can start. You know, you don't have to start right away because, again, like you said, there's a lot of talent on this roster that can, you know, move around and interchange. So.
Absolutely. So, of course, uSTADIUM is a lot of Jets fans. I'm sure you've interacted with quite a few. A lot of Jets fans want to trade Sam Darnold, and they thought, hey, San Francisco has this 43rd pick. You know, we could flip Darnold for the 43rd pick, and San Francisco would be happy because Jimmy Garoppolo is trash, according to Jets fans, apparently, I guess.
Some Niner fans, too.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Sam Darnold rumors? San
So,
Francisco.
man, these Sam Darnold rumors have kept me up at night. I'm not going to lie. These Sam Darnold rumors have been getting out of control. I'm not a big fan of having Sam Darnold in the Niners, but there was a lot of reports, by various different outlets that, he's coming to the Niners. The Niners are going to look into him, et cetera, et cetera. This is the thing, and I've said it before. Jimmy Garoppolo has been the only quarterback that's won under Kyle Shanahan. He's not the greatest quarterback in the world, but he's not horrible like a lot of people make him out to be. He helped this team along with the rest of, the defense, the run game, everything that clicked that season. It's not that Jimmy Garoppolo didn't do anything. He had some big games, and he helped this team get to the Super Bowl, and he's, again, the one quarterback that's won with Kyle Shanahan. But the problem with Jimmy is staying healthy, and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch this offseason have said they predict him to be the quarterback one, the starting quarterback next season, and they keep going on record. But, the one thing they said was, and they left the door a little open, they said, we'll always consider upgrading any position. They didn't just say the quarterback, but of course people look into that comment and they latch on and they think of quarterback because everybody's been wanting Jimmy to go after, he had all the injuries, they lost the Super Bowl, et cetera, et cetera. So Sam Darnold's name now is brought up after they pretty much 49ers Twitter pretty much went through every quarterback you could imagine out there this offseason, Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, and then now we're at Sam Darnold. I don't think really, again, I'm not a big fan of Darnold. Again, I know he struggled on the Jets, who have had a bad couple of years, a horrible head coach, et cetera, not a lot of weapons. But his turnover percentage is not great. He kind of sees ghosts out there. To me, I think he's just turnover prone. And he's got a shoulder injury that he's rehabbing. And not a lot of people are talking about this. To me, that's a red flag. Okay, yeah, I know Jimmy's a very injured quarterback, and that's his bad, trait is getting hurt. And a lot of the fans don't want Jimmy because of those injury, liabilities. Sam Darnold has a shoulder injury. That's bad. As for a quarterback to have a shoulder injury, I'm not on board with that. I don't want to gamble on a quarterback that has injuries. If you're going to lose a quarterback that had injuries, you're going to be in the same boat. And then the other kind of side of that is, so the NFC West is very competitive, like you mentioned. You have Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and now Matt Stafford. Those are three great quarterbacks. Don't disrespect to Jimmy, but again, because of his injury history and everything, he's rightfully the number 4 quarterback ranked in that division. And you bring in Sam Darnold, I don't think he's better than Stafford, Deshaun Watt, or Russell Wilson, or Kyler Murray right now. So you're kind of in the same boat. And Sam Darnold would have to learn Kyle Shanahan's complex offense. He had a hard time running an offense on the Jets. It's not going to be like he comes over overnight and says, "Oh, I got it down, coach." It's going to take time. He's still developing. He's a young player that still hasn't hit his stride. There's a lot of variables, and you don't know if he can even become an elite quarterback because he's had a couple of years of not playing well on a team that's kind of emotionally and mentally hurt him. I think that's the other side of this Darnold take is mentally, how do you leave a team and then try to have success on another team? That doesn't always happen. I haven't seen a lot of quarterbacks. They leave a situation, come to another team, and then turn it around. That doesn't historically happen. I know it has, but I can't off the top of my head really think of a quarterback that just left a situation that as a young quarterback and turn it around and become great. Mike Tannehill maybe is one of them that just came to mind. He left a situation and turned it around, but historically it doesn't happen. The other flip side of this, the good news is yesterday Ian Rappaport was on KMBR and he basically turned down the rumors and he said, hey, look, Sam Darnold's not going to be in the mix in San Francisco. So out of all the reports and out of all the news, I'm believing Ian Rappaport over anybody. Out of all the reports I've heard this offseason, that one, I was like, I took a deep sigh of breath. Took a deep breath. I was like, if Rappaport saying that the Niners aren't going to be going after him, I believe it. But hey, it's the offseason. There's always going to be smoke and mirrors out there, so you never know. But if Rappaport's pretty confident, then I'm pretty confident.
And I think what you go with Garoppolo, you may not be Wilson, you may not be Stafford, you may not be Kyler, but what you do get is a pretty sturdy quarterback. There's a reason he's 24-8 in his career as a starter with New England and San Francisco. And there's a reason he has a career 98.9 pass rating. That's really good. There are very few quarterbacks, the only active quarterbacks I can think of that have a higher career pass rating are like Lamar, Mahomes, Watson, Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, he puts up good numbers when he's healthy, and again, that's the biggest issue is being healthy. The other thing that Lynch and Shanahan kind of touched on this offseason was they got to really improve the backup quarterback department, and you bring in Sam Darnold. does he want to be a backup quarterback? No, he doesn't want to be a backup quarterback. So you have to get a guy that's going to really help and be a backup to the point where, okay, if Jimmy goes down, you're confident that he could come in and lead this team to rattle out a few victories. And I think that's where they are at this point in the offseason is they know Jimmy's going to probably be the quarterback. They need a guy that's going to be able to get back up. Maybe you look in the draft. Maybe you bring in a guy like Fitzpatrick. I like Fitzpatrick. If they have to take a backup, veteran, I like Fitzpatrick. He's always, he's bounced around the league his whole career, but he's the type of guy, anytime he goes to a team, he's going to get a chance at some point. When he comes in, he has like a good 5-game stretch of games. He has that Fitz magic, and he puts up big numbers. So, and it's not like he has to really learn too much because he's been in the league for a long time. So he can kind of process the game a little faster. Honestly, think that he'd be a very viable option. So, and then maybe you still got to look for a backup because I don't know if Rosen's really going to be capable of becoming an elite starter. But hey, maybe they kick the tires, see what he's all about. But I just don't think that Rosen's going to become that player that everybody expected him to be. But it's nice to have him as a backup. He's better than Mullins was, But I still think they're going to look in the draft somehow because if Jimmy, let's say Jimmy gets hurt this season or whatever, he's pretty much going to be out of the picture after that because he's had a lot of chances, right? And if he can't stay healthy, that's a tough development for him. Ryan Fitzpatrick, you get him in there, and maybe only for a year or two. Now you're back to square one. Now who's your starting quarterback? So ultimately, I think the smartest thing for them to do is find some young quarterback that can sit and learn, and they can groom until they're ready to finally, cut the cord on Jimmy. But it just doesn't really make sense to get a guy like Darnold or anything. I think the only viable option, and you talked about this before we started, was Deshaun Watson is honestly the only upgrade that would make sense. But Deshaun Watson, again, there's a lot of variables on there. The Houston Texans are not going to just let him go. They're going to try their best to keep him around. He might have a holdout. Who knows what's going to happen? They want a lot of compensation if he ever does get traded. Niners may not want to give up all that compensation, and we'll see. Again, it's going to be a lot to get a guy like Watson. Would it be smart? Of course, but it's not realistic right now. And then the other end of the spectrum is the Niners had their chances to get some quarterbacks like Matt Stafford. They didn't want him. So that tells me that they have really stuck by Jimmy, this whole offseason. Cam Newton, he went back to the Patriots. Carson Wentz, he went to the Colts. They could have got any of these guys if they really wanted to, but they didn't even make an attempt, really.
So earlier in the offseason, I think I read somewhere that Matt Ryan was like on the trade block, and I thought that could be an interesting option that San Francisco could pursue. But I don't know if San Francisco would really want 37, 38-year-old Matt Ryan, even though he does know the system. And I do think San Francisco is in a unique spot as they have such a conglomerate of offensive talent with Kittle, with Debo, with Ayuk, with the rushing attack that Shanahan just produces. San Francisco is one of the few teams that I don't think they need an elite quarterback to be very successful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think that it's an intriguing option to get Matt Ryan, but the only issue with him is his contract's pretty insane. I mean, people get upset about Jimmy's contract. Matt Ryan's is going to be more expensive. So it's one of those things where I don't think it's a bad idea to bring in Matt Ryan because you're right. He does know the system. He's played with Kyle before, had an MVP season under Kyle. He fit like a glove, but a little bit older, so you wouldn't have him around for too long. But hey, as a Niner fan, these fans just want to win a Super Bowl. So if he came in and were to win the Super Bowl, they'd be happy. But ultimately, the money just doesn't line up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to wrap it up. We have one more question for you real quick. Gun to your head, who is the starting quarterback week 1?
It's going to be the franchise, Jimmy Garoppolo. Gun to my head is I've heard all these rumors all off season. I've heard nothing but, Deshaun Watson, Sam Darnold, Matt Stafford. I was on the Matt Stafford train because I think he would have been a great quarterback to have on this team. He was on the Lions, and the Lions are the Lions. You bring him up to a team like Ayuk and Kittle and Debo, etc. He would have been unbelievable, I think. But again, they didn't get him. To me, it tells me they're probably telling us, everybody, the truth is they said we're going to stick with Jimmy this season. They expect him to be the quarterback number 1 this season. Next season's a whole nother story. I think quarterback 1 in 2021 is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, whether they draft a quarterback or not, that's to be determined. I can't tell you that. But gun to my head right now, I'm going to tell you that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be your starting quarterback.
All right, sounds good. So this is episode 1 of the Our SF Hour. Be sure to follow Raj at Our SF 49ers on Instagram, and check his content out. Check his content out on uSTADIUM. We will be back next Saturday with more Fuego content. Getting into some free agency stuff. See who the 49ers sign. See who they don't sign. See who maybe they break the bank for Trent Williams. See where Richard Sherman goes. The whole shebang next week. So thank you for coming on, Raj.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. And next week's show is going to be, I'm predicting it's going to be a wild show, man, because I think there's going to be a lot happening. I honestly predict that Trent Williams is going to get his contract Monday. I think that's going to be big Monday news for the Niners, so we'll see.
That would be great. That would be great. You know, the Ravens have their fair share of tackle problems that I'm dealing with right now. So it'd be nice to see another team figure out their left tackle while our left tackle is going on Twitter and saying, I am a left tackle. Okay, Orlando, probably get it.
I saw that, man. These players, they're becoming like the NBA now. They're calling their shots, man. It's like the James Harden effect, you know?
Yeah, it's ruthless out there. And I know Orlando, his dad played left tackle for the Ravens, and that's really valuable to him. And I don't want to, like, that's a boundary I don't cross. Like, money-wise, okay, whatever. You're making millions of dollars. Or, oh, come on, left tackle and right tackle aren't all that different, whatever. But, like, his dad played left tackle, so it's like, I get it, Orlando, you want to play left tackle.
So, it's sentimental value, you know, I get that.
Yeah, so if you fetch a first-round pick from the Chargers.
There you go. Awesome. Hey, man, at the end of the day, if that's what you got to do, business is business. That's the one thing I've learned over the years, is you have to disconnect yourself, you know, when you're covering the team, because, man, sometimes you being a fan of this team, it hits you, man. You're just like, oh, man. Like that DeForest Buckner move last season. That was rough, man. That was tough. As a fan, it was tough. But when you understand the business of it, it's like, okay, I mean, you know, you have to explain it to people, but they still don't want to hear it, you know?
Yeah. And speaking of hearing, we'll be back next week so you can listen to Raj fire off some more stuff, 49ers stuff. So thank you for dropping your likes, dropping your comments. Make sure you subscribe to the uSTADIUM channel. And for more great content, we have tons of creators coming down the pipeline. We have the Cowboys, got the Packers, got some AFC East content coming up soon. And of course, Raj, you got your 49ers. Exciting times.
Yes,
so we'll see you next Saturday. Peace.